Welcome back, everyone. It's been
Welcome
some
back.
time.
Been months. We
We
didn't.
we have adult life, so we had to do adult things,
Oh yeah,
which sucks.
man. We had to
and
do like real life things instead of talking politics and complaining about the world. But we're back, and now we get to do that.
and unfortunately, the world is on fire.
All right,
I feel like that meme of the dog that's just sitting while everything's burning.
this is fine.
It's fine. I'm fine. Everything's fine. The Russians are going after the Ukraine. God knows, state houses are getting stormed, but everything's all right.
It's all good.
Oh, God help us all. Maybe people are right. Maybe it is the rapture. I don't know. I'm not even religious.
Look, I'm not
Oh,
saying it
God.
is the rapture because I don't believe in it. But like, if it was the rapture, that'd be pretty sick.
If this was the rapture, God help us.
It would explain a lot.
We're definitely in the, not the welcome to the heaven group.
Oh, for sure.
We're definitely not there. All right. So just to everyone, it's been a while. Like we said, we both have adult jobs. A lot's happened. The Chauvin case happened. I think the verdict that everyone was hoping happened. Unfortunately, I think there will be problems. We'll talk about that. Andrew, do you have anything to say before we continue?
I do not. Let's get started with the first article.
Well, wonderful. All right, so we're going to go over what happened in Oklahoma. We're looking at the Oklahoma News 4 news article. As always, the article will be in the bio, because we fact check. Protesters interrupt Oklahoma House proceedings over a number of this session's bills. Mainly, they stormed in because the Oklahoma State House was about to pass an anti-riot bill. We'll get into that. Yeah. Just, You got anything to add?
No, I mean, let's get into the article, and then I'll
All
throw
right,
my
so
2 cents in once we get into the meat of it.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, gosh, I'm sorry. That sucks. Oklahoma City, a group of protesters were kicked out of the Oklahoma House of Representatives after they disrupted proceedings to object to a slew of bills they called egregious and oppressive to Oklahomans. Those are very big words for the people that stormed in there. I don't believe they actually said that. As a writer, I know they do not know these words. There's just so much going on this session that's wrong, and it's inherently hurtful to the people of Oklahoma, and we're not going to stand for it, said Adriana Laws, the president and founder of the Coalition of Freedom and Justice Coalition. That's the Oklahoma BLM movement. I'd say I put a link in there, but I'm kind of, I don't want to get hurt. So, continuing. Her group organized in the face of what they described as an anti-protest bill, like HB 1643, a bill that makes it illegal to film police as they perform their duties. That's kind of stupid. Or HB 1674, a bill that protects drivers who hit protesters if they feel threatened, both of which have been signed by the governor today.
So now's where I've got some opinions. So 2 bills that they were specifically pointed out, right? First bill makes it illegal to film police as they perform their duties. What a stupid fucking bill.
Yeah, that's dumb. But you know what that is? Do you know what that is, though?
I mean, I have to assume that's an attempt to stop these stories from going viral.
No, well, I also think it's an attempt because a lot of the times these videos get chopped up to a certain narrative. Like what we saw with, oh my god, what's her name? Machia Bryant? Is that her name?
Bryant was right. I don't know how to pronounce her first name.
I feel so terrible that we don't know how to pronounce this poor girl's name. The department immediately released the body cam because they didn't want the protest to get violent. But then you also had the neighbor, who actually the neighbor's video kind of painted the police as the good people in the scenario. But I understand why they don't want it. I think it's a stupid bill, personally. It's like, you're a public servant, you should be allowed to be filmed regardless.
Right. Now,
But
that's a completely different thing compared to the next bill. So a bill that protects drivers who hit protesters if they feel threatened. Now, I would say having some sort of protection for self-defense is just a thing that makes sense, right?
Yeah, well, you promised that in the Second Amendment.
Right. Now, the only thing I would, I guess, nitpick at this is it shouldn't necessarily be based on if they feel threatened, because it's kind of hard to prove how someone feels or if someone feels threatened. If there was a clear and present danger, then you should be perfectly it perfectly makes sense that you should be able to drive through people who are actively posing as threats to your life.
Definitely, and I agree. But also, I feel like that's going to be something that it'll come down to the district attorneys to define if it was justifiable. So, like that incident in Texas, remember when they put the AK-47 in the gentleman's face?
Right.
In that scenario, I said that man had the right to plow through that crowd. That was a immediate threat. But then you had that other video where you had the protesters holding hands and being like, kumbaya, and then the nurse came out and like curb stomped them all. That a little unnecessary.
Just a little bit.
Yeah,
like, so the key here is that these bills have, or at least some of them, seem to have a good amount of logic behind them. Flawed, sure, but like, you going in and like storming the building itself is not going to, it's not even going to stop what you want stopped, right? It's just going to delay it by like a few hours. But second, it's not sending a great message. Like, when you protest, there's a reason that you do so without obstructing people's abilities to like continue to do what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, this is like, how many people last summer were killed because they were in ambulances and people were blocking streets?
And I get the idea that they want to stop this bill from happening. But it's just, you going into the building isn't going to stop this bill from getting passed.
Yeah, and this is, and I'm not gonna, so this is a long article, but we went over like the main points there against these two bills. The issue I see here is it also shows a double standard a little bit. They went in and started threatening and yelling at these representatives. Now, the way it's been, and I'm not sitting here defending what happened on the 6th. I think you and me both know that was wrong, and they all should be locked up.
Exactly.
But this is the same thing. They stormed in hoping to sway the vote. And
same
scare
thing
people
on a smaller scale.
Yeah, so should they not be seen as insurrectionists?
I mean, insurrectionist would be a strong word just because of the nature of they're just trying to stop a single bill. But like, it's the same concept. You're obstructing lawmaking, and like that's fine in the sense that like you disagree with the law getting passed, and you showing your displeasure for that law getting passed is perfectly reasonable. But like, going into the building and threatening people that's not it.
Yeah, and you know what? Again, what happened on the 6th was terrible, but now we know the only people killed were the Trump supporters, because even now we found out Officer Sitnik actually did not die the way Congress tried to portray it. The poor guy had a heart attack, which, that stinks. But apparently he had one earlier in the day, according to some reports, before the protest even started. Which, why was he on, like... they need to investigate the Washington police.
It's
Honestly,
absolutely ridiculous. You allow a man with a heart attack to
you're allowing
continue
a
duty
man
that day.
you're allowing a man to have problems to deal with over 200,000 people. How did you think that was gonna end, you idiots?
With the National Guard not even like in place.
Well, and now
Oh,
we got this
God.
whole they're rioting again now, and I think this all goes into that subject of the riots because like I love when they say mostly peaceful protests because you know what that means?
Not entirely peaceful protests.
Somewhat violent protests. It's like you can try to angle it, or set any picture you want to see, but when your people are on the screen with buildings on fire behind you, you just look like an idiot.
Like, here's the thing: if there's a mostly peaceful protest, that means there's violence going on, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
They're like the only way I can think of it is they're comparing, like, what could they possibly be comparing this to if not like you have a mostly peaceful protest, right? What are the other options? You have an entirely peaceful protest. That'd be better, right? We all agree with that. Or you have a mostly violent protest.
Well, I think
Nobody agrees with a mostly violent protest. Can you even name one? There might be like a couple mostly violent protests in like American history.
Well, now let's get to this. So Maxine Waters goes to Minneapolis. She says we need to get more confrontational. We need to get in their faces. Regardless, we need to stay in the streets. Like 2 hours later in Minneapolis, people fire on the National Guard. Should she not be held to the same standards that Donald Trump was held to on January 6th?
I mean, I would argue that the president has more of a responsibility than like a random citizen, but like it's definitely like
Maxine Waters is a representative.
Yeah, but like the president should be setting like the highest example out of anyone. So I would argue Trump is an exceptional case in that point. But like you still have to hold them accountable.
Yeah, but like what Trump said, and I'm not gonna be an apologist. The man was talking like a 50-year-old father. He's like, go and protest peacefully, patriotically and peacefully. It's like, dude, shut up.
So the one thing I'll say about like when okay, hold on. So what was you had quoted or not quoted but like summarized what Maxine Waters had said?
So Maxine Waters said, if we do not get a first-degree conviction, which they weren't going to get because he wasn't convicted on first degree.
Right, that doesn't...
Genius.
That was premeditated? That wouldn't even make any...
Yeah.
There's no reason to think that was premeditated at all.
We need to stay in the streets, we need to get more confrontational, we need to do more, we can't stop. And then 2 hours later, National Guard get fired on.
And it's so bizarre because, like, if you take out just the one part where they say more confrontational, then there isn't really anything wrong with what she's saying. Because if she's saying, like, protest more, stay in the streets, keep it up, that's fine. Like, sure, plenty of people, maybe myself included, will agree with you or will agree or disagree with you, right? But like when you throw in when you throw in be confrontational, that's the problem.
Like at this point in this country, we know what confrontational means. It's a semantics game to get away with saying something. And I just see a sad double standard here, because I'm like, okay, Trump said this, but at the end of his speech, he literally said, now go protest patriotically and peacefully and root on the lawmakers, and they tried to impeach him on that. She literally said, get more confrontational, and she's like, oh, I never said that. It's like, lady, you're recorded saying it. This isn't the 70s. We have recordings of you saying these things. So that's my problem with this. And you know what? I have all I am all for racial justice. I'm all for police reform. But there's a way to go about it. This is not the way. You're making it a mob rule country. And that's not what we are. We are a country of laws. We follow the rule of law. And we don't follow mob mentality. That's why we have an electoral college.
All right.
I
So do we want
apologize.
to do we want to go
I
through
got
the rest of
serious.
this article, or do we think we've exhausted everything we were going to say on this topic?
Well, we talked about what we had to talk about. They passed it.
Yep.
We saw that coming.
They passed it anyway.
To add on, 35 other states have put forward similar laws. I think Pennsylvania did too. And I think Wolf said
is that similar laws to the like driving through the crowd bill?
yeah, they're anti-riot bills.
Okay.
Apparently, police, if there's a riot, they could just call the state of emergency and shut it down. I think Pennsylvania's doing it because they have a Republican legislator, and I think they have a veto-proof majority. So, yeah, that's the Oklahoma thing. And if anyone who's listening, if you want to protest, be our guest. But just be peaceful.
Yeah, just like don't break the law, don't break into people, don't break in anywhere, don't threaten violence upon anyone. Just
Don't commit arson.
yeah, don't commit arson. Like protest is one thing, violence is another. They should be kept separate.
Yeah, like I marched the first month after, like when the protest came to my town, I marched peacefully. And I'm a conservative. What did you do, Andrew?
Absolutely nothing.
I rest my case.
All right. So we're going to move on here now to our second topic, our second article, this coming from Reuters. We have Republicans unveil $568 billion infrastructure package to counter Biden's $2.3 trillion plan. Washington, April 22nd. U.S. Senate Republicans on Thursday proposed a $568 billion five-year infrastructure package as a counteroffer to President Joe Biden's sweeping $2.3 trillion plan, calling their measure a starting point for bipartisan negotiations. The proposal, which falls below an initial Republican target range of $600 to $800 billion, focuses narrowly on traditional infrastructure projects, including roads, bridges, rail, ports, water systems, and on broadband access. It would not result in higher taxes, but be fully paid through user fees and unspent federal funds. So as far as thoughts there, do you have any thoughts so far?
Well, I feel like I think as a counter offer, this is a little better. Like my issue with President Biden's plan is he's saying everything under the sun's infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel this really does more so target infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean
So-
it's very, very specifically targeting infrastructure.
Like I think, and we definitely living where we live, we know we definitely need the infrastructure. Like I don't want money going to foreign countries anymore. I want them going onto my city streets. But I like it so far.
Yeah, so my only point that I'd make is I'd say it's great that they're coming up with a counter proposal instead of just declining everything that like comes their way.
Which is usually what they do.
Right. So that's good. I'm happy about that. That being said, I would love to. I mean, this is the left-wing person in me, left-wing big centralized government person. Not synonymous. I'm just both of those. I would love to see them raise taxes to pay for a little bit more. But like narrowing the focus on the bill is fine, right?
Yeah, I agree. And you know what? I read a little bit ahead and I saw Schumer bringing up the green jobs and everything. And I agree, we definitely need green jobs. But right now in this country, we need to go about it in a very careful way. Because they overnight cut our energy dependency off. And we need to be able to slowly work towards that. This is the issue in this country from everything, like the revolution, the Civil War. We do everything in this country like ripping off a Band-Aid. We need to be careful on how we do it.
So the article continues. Where was I? Oh, there we are. This is the largest infrastructure investment plan that Republicans have come forward with, said Senator Shelley Moore Capito, who has helped lead the effort as top Republican on the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. We see this as an offer that's on the table and deserves a response, she told a press conference, while flanked by leading Republican members of other Senate committees with jurisdiction over infrastructure. Republicans sent the proposal to the White House on Thursday before it was unveiled, but the package, which represents less than 1/4 of Biden's package, has already been dismissed by Democrats in Congress as inadequate. Biden, who this week asked Republicans to offer a counterproposal by mid-May, proposed a sweeping infrastructure plan that not only includes traditional infrastructure projects, but also addresses climate change and expands human services such as elder care. Republicans have opposed the size and scope of Biden's proposal, as well as its plan to pay for some spending by raising taxes on U.S. corporations. Thursday's proposal could form the basis of a two-track infrastructure process that would include a smaller bipartisan bill and a larger measure that Democrats could move through Congress without Republican votes. So the article ends there, and this is the main point that I wanted to bring up with this article, is that partisan politics is ridiculous.
It's dividing us worse.
Everyone agrees that there needs to be some sort of infrastructure overhaul in the United States. But because of partisan politics, nothing has gotten we're in this back and forth. I'm gonna include more than I know. Biden is including things in his bill that he knows Republicans aren't going to accept. And the Republicans are lowballing, throwing a smaller amount of revenue towards their plan that they know Biden's not going to accept. And at the end of the day, this just slows down and the American people who need to use this infrastructure are the ones suffering for this back and forth. Everyone agrees there should be some sort of infrastructure. Why can't we just start with, hey, this is the problem, this is how much money it's going to cost to fix, let's find a way to do it.
Yeah, I agree. And, this goes back to the thing we were just saying before you finished. Everyone's for saving the environment. Everyone's for doing these things. Everyone's for green jobs. But you're going too fast. They cannot continue doing this partisanship, this bipartisanship, because they need to be bipartisan. They can't be partisan. Biden came in and said, "Oh, we're going to unite. We're going to unite." Everything they have passed through the House has been on party lines. Everything. And I look at someone like Joe Manchin, which, God bless him. God bless him. The man says, I'm going to sit and try to make a deal. Because he's the deciding vote. And he knows it, so he's like, we're going to work together. This is ridiculous. We can't keep dividing. And this has been going on since Bush's last year in office. And it hasn't stopped. It's just this is what brings countries down. It's just this bickering between one another. If you really think about the French Revolution, that's literally where the phrase left and right came from, because you had the Jacobins on the left side and you had the conservatives on the right, and the Jacobins and conservatives hated each other. And then what happened? The Jacobins just killed off all the conservatives. We really need to understand, and that's why I actually like the English system, the German system, the system the Russians act like they have, of parliamentarianism. Don't hurt me, Daddy Putin. But that's it. Someone the other day I heard say, "Oh, parliament's horrible because there's 800 different parties." I'm like, that's a good thing, because then they have to work together. When we have a two-party system, and you know what? That's why I'm a little ashamed of people like AOC and Ilhan Omar. Do what you have to do to get your policies through. Stop grifting on behalf of the establishment. And you know what? Marjorie Taylor Greene, kooky bird. Kook. But at least she stands for her principles and goes against McConnell and McCarthy. Like, I'd rather that. Like, AOC speaks this big game, but at the end of the day, she votes the way Nancy Pelosi votes.
And it's like the whole, bringing it back to like just how partisan of a country we are. You saw the bill to like proposal that passed through the House to make DC a state.
Yeah, and it won't pass through the Senate.
Right. This shouldn't be like the whole conversation surrounding this is Democrats want to get is like Democrats want to get more seats into the Senate.
Yeah.
And Republicans don't want it. Why can't you just like exclusively look at do the people of Washington D.C., not the politicians, but the people living there, want to be a state, and 2, do they meet the requirements for becoming a state? Those should be the only things looked at in whether or not Washington, D.C. becomes a state. But instead, it's this whole back and forth of, oh, you're only doing this because you want the seats. What? We want the seats? No, that's not why we're doing it. But, honestly, like, you know full well that they're going to, like, that, like, dude, everyone knows DC's going to be,
it is so painful.
A Democratic, like, would be Democratic state.
Yeah. It's so painful watching it, and someone confronted me because I said, okay, you know what? If you want to make DC a state, fine. You should make someplace like in New York, Long Island. Long Island has a very Republican community. Make Long Island a state and make DC a state.
The argument against Long Island is that you don't like draw the state lines based on policy. Or not policy, based on like political alignment.
No,
political alignment
agree.
Will change. But I
agree. But that's what they're doing in DC.
Yeah, like
that's literally what they're doing.
And it's like,
first of all,
whether or not it should be a state, like I don't know, honestly. I'm not super informed on whether or not the people of DC want to be a state, or if their economy's like large and stable enough, or if they need like I know they have enough people. But
they say
that's about it.
They say DC doesn't have representation. DC does have representation. DC has 2 shadow senators and 1 shadow representative. They have a government of their own. The whole point of DC's existence was so no state could control the government.
Right. And
that's why this is stupid.
The other interesting thing about this is if the issue was exclusively about making DC have representation, you could, I would imagine, that you could push, instead of state, like if this was the only issue, right, you could push to have them get representation, like proper representation where they have the ability to vote without statehood, right?
Yeah.
But
give the shadow representatives more rights.
Right. Like, give them the ability to vote on anything that pertains to specifically DC. That, like, the thing is, if you give them the ability to vote on any matter, at that point, yeah, why not make it a state, right? But at the same time, you know Republicans aren't going to be okay with that. On the other hand, are Republicans really so entrenched in their party politics that they wouldn't let DC vote only on matters that have to do specifically with city management? Because, like, as much as they are entrenched in party politics, I feel like that would be a reasonable thing to have them vote on, right?
Yeah,
but they're not going that route.
I agree with that. But at the end of the day, it's also... it's how both parties are framing the argument, and this is just like the court packing thing. It's not going to pass, but it's just political grandstanding. Be like, oh look, we tried to do it, but they said no.
And yeah, just to be clear, like our problem with this isn't whether or not DC should be a state. If DC should be a state, it should be a state. If it shouldn't, it shouldn't, right? But our problem is the way that the parties are framing this argument.
Yeah, first of all,
ridiculous.
It wasn't put on a ballot. It was created by the Washington, D.C. City Council, and then the mayor pushed it through to the Congress and the president. you didn't ask the people of DC if they wanted this. You just said, we're going to take the initiative and we're going to do it. It's like, maybe they don't want to do it. Because you know why? DC doesn't have to suffer under certain taxes and everything that states do. That's why there is such a big population in DC, because they're protected from certain things. So, this is pretty much... I'm not saying it kind of is, but... I was like, I'm not going to say this is a power grab. It kind of is, though. But we're getting to this point, and you know what? We're seeing this with the Democrats, and I always say this. A tiger is most violent at the end. The Democrats right now have done so many things in these 4 months since President Biden's been in that they are horrified of 2022. Because they're like, we didn't go through with any of our promises. We said $2,000 checks. We didn't give them $2,000. We said this didn't happen. Deportations are still happening. The border's a nightmare. All these things combined, and now they're sitting there like, oh, well, let's do this. And it's like, no, you're making yourself look worse. Just do things to help the communities. Stop with this crazy bickering and just do your jobs. God, I'm so sorry, but I keep going into monologues. Jesus Christ.
No, that's fantastic. That's what we're here for.
Dude, it's enough, man. It's like, I'm not paying taxes, which thanks government for that, by the way. Love my tax return. What are they going to? They're going to these bickering fools who get chased out of every place they go to. I haven't seen a politician go to any public place that people weren't booing them to death. It really is exhausting, though. It's like, dude, we don't care what your political beliefs are. Just work with the other side and fix things. Like, I'm from a very Democrat area. I'm not a Democrat, but guess what? You represent me. You represent me, not only the Democrats. Do your job. Whew. I'm at average, so.
I think that's about all we have for domestic issues going on at the moment.
I just need to say, I saw Biden do a press conference yesterday, and it really made me sad, because he's so old looking. And he's so
It really
bad.
doesn't help that he's not a good speaker.
And then he uses a teleprompter all the... I'm like, bro, I can see you reading it. I literally see his eyes go right to left. I'm like...
And that's the trouble is because he's not a good speaker, he has to use a teleprompter, right? But also, he's so his problems with public speaking are bad enough that you can not only can you tell that he's using a teleprompter, but when he still messes up despite using the teleprompter, it looks so much worse.
He literally not to bash
man,
on him.
I'm sure the man has coherent thoughts behind it, but coherent sentences are difficult.
I think, as someone who has suffered with family who has, and this isn't like throwing punches at him or anything, and I've been saying, I met Biden back a few years ago when I worked in Washington, when he was vice president. He was polite to me. He was always very cordial. Even then, I was seeing what was coming. And I'm not saying politically, I have family who suffers from dementia and stuff like that, and I could see it, and I truly feel bad for him, because I feel it's really messed up, because honestly, I think he was the only person that was going to beat Trump. Everyone else did not.
That's the tragic, tragedy of the past election.
But, he also is so, he's rocking chair politician now. He should not be governing. He should not be doing things. And as we get into our next article, this is going to prove that he shouldn't be doing things. Roasted.
All right. Well, which article are we starting with?
We'll go to the New York Times with my boy, with your boy, Daddy Putin.
All right, take it away.
All right, everyone. So, the New York Times. Putin warns of a Russian red line the West will regret crossing. That's the first time I think I've heard Russians talk about red lines since 1991. All right. In a State of the Nation, wow, he doesn't even have State of the Union, he's State of the Nation speech, President Vladimir Putin warned of a fast and tough response to security threats in a message seemingly aimed at President Biden and delivered amid large protests. Well, maybe stop killing people and they won't happen. April 21st, 2021. Also, I'm going to explain there's been an update since this. We'll talk about that when I'm done. Moscow. He warned ominously of red lines in Russia's security that, if crossed, would bring a powerful asymmetric response. He reminded Western leaders once again of the fearsomeness of his country's modernized nuclear arsenal, and he boasted Russia's moral superiority over the West. That's pretty. That's pretty bold. That's a pretty bold statement. It's a pretty bold statement. Yet, even as President Vladimir I think his name is Ivanovich Putin lashed out at foreign enemies, real or perceived. This is definitely written by a liberal. In a State of the Nation speech on Wednesday, tens of thousands of Russians defied a heavy police presence to pour into the streets to challenge his rule. In Moscow, some gathered across the street from the Kremlin to chant, "Go away." Yeah, they did that under Stalin, and it ended well. It was a snapshot of Russia in the third decade of Putin's rule. A leader facing increasingly angry and desperate opposition, but firmly in power with his country's vast resources and huge security apparatus at his disposal. Faulted for lagging...
I just love the audacity for him to claim moral superiority over the West.
What are you talking about? They didn't get COVID. There's no COVID in Russia.
And not even just claiming moral superiority over specifically the U.S., right? Because there are arguments as to things that we as a country have done individually that are suspect. I wouldn't say to the degree of Russia, but
the Russians have always done
this.
A
few
though.
Problems we've had, but
the Russians
he put the entire West. My goodness.
But they've always done this. The czars have done this. The general secretaries have done this because Russia was the only country that didn't have colonies in Africa, so they didn't take part in the slave trade. They didn't do anything to the Inuits in Alaska. They just stayed in Russia and Asia, and they're like, "Oh, we weren't part of imperialism." It's like, bro, look what you did to your own people.
It's like you weren't part of imperialism outside of your region.
Yeah, it's like, dude, have you ever heard of pogroms?
Eastern Europe, not a...
have you ever heard of the word pogrom? What the czars were doing? How about what what's his name did to the Ukraine? Stalin.
Just absolute madness. All right, yeah, go ahead.
The guy has a set. I'll tell him that. Faulted for a lagging response to the coronavirus and with his popularity ratings decline. When was he ever popular? Though still high, the Russian leader used the address to outline a vision for Russia as it emerges from the pandemic, one that promised numerous new economic subsidies, but with silent about political rights, of course. And in recent weeks, was he going to say, "I'm going to free you all"? And in recent weeks, he has seemingly fallen back on a tried and true tactic to bolster his fortunes, fanning nationalist flames. He has ordered enormous troop buildup on Russia's border with Ukraine and has gone toe-to-toe with President Biden, who issued a new round of sanctions last week, undeterred by Putin's saber-rattling in Ukraine. I like that word because I'm just picturing him on a bear, rattling his sword.
This is where we have an update where the enormous buildup wasn't a...
invasion.
It wasn't an invasion. They were doing a test of their, process, I guess, to make sure that all of their troops had the ability to go out if needed. To invade, right, basically. So I think they framed it in terms of to defend Russia. But, you're gonna defend Russia from a land invasion by Ukraine? Something tells me if we get to war with Russia, we're not gonna start with NATO going through Ukraine to invade Russia by land.
Well, we look at NATO and the three biggest armies by Russia. So this is the numbers we have here, and this is from the United Nations military apparatus reports. The Russian military is 1 million strong. They have 2 million in reserve. So you have that. And then the NATO forces that will engage the Russians first, the Ukrainians have 1 million men on the field. The Germans only have 100,000. The British only have 100,000. The French are the biggest military with 200,000 men. It's like men and women. I apologize. It's like by the time everyone else will be able to fight, it'll be like a modern day blitzkrieg. Because then you
right,
have
like for sure will be like NATO will. I guarantee it. NATO, if there is war between NATO and Russia in the near future, it will be because of Russian aggression that starts the conflict.
Well, it's going to 100% be Russian aggression. But then, but we're also missing out on this. China has 2 million men on the field. Actually, 2 million soldiers. And India has 3 million. Now, we always talk about how India is like America's ally. India and Russia are very good friends. So, in the case that Russia is aggressive, we're already going to face Russia and China. Will India side with Russia?
I mean, I'm not sure if they would, just because India doesn't have the greatest relationship. I mean, maybe my understanding of this is incorrect, but I don't think India has the greatest relationship with China.
Oh, they don't. They hate each other.
Right. So, like, if China comes in, India might just choose to sit it out entirely. But, like, it's...
But now
it's
what
just
if we come in?
It's really going to depend on... I imagine if China uses would use I mean, this is all hypothetical, right? Like, conjecture. But I imagine if China used the opportunity to go into, like, Kashmir, India would end up siding with us, and if China left them alone, they might decide to, like, kind of do something similar to maybe what we did in World War I.
Just
giving supplies, yeah.
Well, but now we have this scenario. So say Russia hits the Ukraine, China with their 3 million soldier army hits Taiwan. Now we have to split all the NATO forces down the middle, and India's not being threatened, so they'll side with the Russians.
Yeah, maybe.
Like, this is the issue here, and, I think everyone's got the gist. Putin's just grandstanding and, being Putin. But, we said to Putin, we're going to send a fleet into the Black Sea. And then Putin said, don't come into the Black Sea, or we're going to have problems. And then as our fleet approached the Black Sea, he had the Russian Navy do a firing demonstration, and President Biden called the troops back. And it's like, why did you do that?
Like, what was the point of standing your ground in the first place if you're just going to call them back at the first sign of possible conflict?
It's like, dude, you need to stand your ground. Like, okay, now they withdrew, and, the news and media is like, oh, the Russians got scared, they backed off. No, they saw what they could get away with. So, for all we know, they're going back, and they're going to come back with 300,000 men. For all we know.
Like, this was a test. Now, obviously, we're not hoping for any sort of war. We're
Absolutely
super
not.
against it. But, like, at the end of the day, Russia is, like, this, like, showing from Russia isn't a good sign for those of us who live in the West.
Yeah, and, like, we already have this war in Ukraine that's been going on for freaking years now at this point. You have 42,000 men fighting against Ukrainians already with Russian support. Right now we need a defusing of these international issues. And that's what President Biden needs to do. And, calling him what do you call him? You call him like a vicious killer or something?
Something like that.
Which I personally think Putin probably loved. Like, the guy's a maniac. He probably loved it. He's like, yes, I am. But I can't admit that to the public. But, like, it's like, you gotta stop. Like, we keep trying to make it look like Biden's giving him thrashings. The fact that he turned the Navy away after the live firing demonstration, that just broke the veil. It's not us who's giving the thrashings. The Russians said, don't come here. And Biden was like, oh no, we're going to come. And then he did his deployments. And Biden was like, oh, hell no, I don't want to be involved. And pulled out. It's like, you can't appease a dictator.
I'm gonna call back to earlier in the article, where Putin said, that in regards to the red lines that if we crossed, they'd bring a response. He used the word a powerful asymmetric response. What that would mean, or at least my interpretation of that, is if the West pushes Russia an inch, Russia's gonna push back, or pushes with like a pound, they're gonna push back with a ton.
Yeah,
like that's my interpretation of that, and that's like. I know that the West and NATO has the capability of pushing harder than Russia has the capability of.
But it'll take
But
more
nobody
time.
wants that. We don't want any of this to happen.
But the other issue is the majority of NATO's forces are not mobilized. The entire Russian army is mobilized. So we have this situation like 1939 Europe. The Germans were completely mobilized and ready. The British only, I think, had 100,000 men in France when the Germans invaded. It's like, we can't sit here and be like, oh, well, you know, it's this and this and this. It's like, no, we need to understand, they're mobilized. And I'm not saying we need to militarize and be like, we need to prepare for war, but
just be aware that it, like, we need to be standing up to them, no appeasement. We should have learned that from World War II. Now, yeah. I'm not going to say this is exactly the same situation, because it's clearly not. But, like, again, it's same thing, different, like, just not quite as much of a problem.
Well, and you know what, I truly believe this, everyone, and, you know, I'll stake myself on this. His nuclear threat, I think, was an empty threat. Because his whole reason to go into Ukraine is to take the land.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I think we're all agreed on the whole mutually assured destruction thing, that we're not gonna go for all-out nuclear war.
Start ripping the other apart.
Right, but at the same time, tensions are rising, and they might not be close to war yet, but they're definitely trending in that direction. So hopefully we can turn that around before it becomes too much of a problem.
You know, as we were saying before, just being, you know, is Biden a wartime president? Will Biden be able to command armies? Will he be able to fight this war that might happen?
Well, I would guess, and maybe I'm wrong, but I would guess that if we are trending to war towards Russia, it will take most, if not all, of Biden's presidency for tensions to rise enough for that to happen. So I think we will have. I think if we are trending to war, and I can't say if we are or not. Obviously, we're going in that direction, but like it's not. You know, there's plenty. I think there's plenty of time to reduce tensions, and that if we do end up in war, there will be another U.S. election cycle before that happens.
Yeah. But now,
I'm not even convinced it's going to happen soon.
Yeah, well, we're ignoring the sleeping dragon here, and maybe you can give me insight on this. Why does the left constantly point at the Russians, who, honestly, I think we beat them in a war regardless. I think we have a much more modern army. But why do we keep paying attention to the Russians while the Chinese have double everyone's armies, is amassing and has not stopped amassing at the Straits of Taiwan, and has actually caused Macron and France to send ships to face off with them? Why are we choosing to ignore that, but not ignore, like, the Russians who know they won't win a modern war?
My guess would be that the reason it doesn't get as much attention is because everyone's eyes are and have been focused on Russia since the Cold War. That there's just this negative opinion of that has been deeply rooted in America of what's going on in Russia, and that
I'd say probably.
that hasn't died down, and that most people just haven't thought of China as more than an economic threat.
Well, I'd say before the Cold War, honestly. The whole reason we refused to join World War One was because of the Tsar. We were like, we're not going to join you. You've got a dictator.
Yeah, but also, to be fair, during World War II, American popular opinion of Stalin was actually pretty good.
During World War II, modern Russia.
Uncle Joe.
Look at Stalin like he's a god. I was watching this video from I think it was Vice, and they were going around Moscow asking people their opinions on Stalin, and people our age were like, "Oh, he was such a great guy," and I'm like, "What?" I'm like, he was a butcher. But now this goes back to what me and you have talked about before, and this is why people like Hitler rise to power. These regions only really know one style of government. It's like America, we were born to be a democracy. We were born from democracy. Russia has always been dictators. Germany has always been, I'm not going to say dictators, but absolute rulers. Same thing with the Middle East. I, to this day, say the worst thing we could have done was got rid of Saddam. Because we blew that powder keg up. But, this is the issue, is we think our system's the best. And I do think our system's the best. I am a staunch constitutionalist. I think the men who founded this country were so ahead of their time with their system, and that's why we have lasted longer than most other governments. But at the same time, it's like you can't teach an old horse new tricks. It's like Russia has never had a period that they were actually democratic.
I'm gonna make a call here. This is a bit of a change of topic, but I'm gonna make a call that if there is some next global conflict, I don't think Russia starts it. I don't think China starts it. Actually, well, I can't say.
I feel like if they
I
go
can't say
states.
China might start it, but I'm gonna say that more likely than China starting it, I think Iran is gonna start it.
Really?
Yeah. I think it's going to be a regional thing where Iran is trying to put more pressure on the countries in its region, and then that's going to explode into us, Russia, China, NATO getting involved there. I don't think it's going to I think there will be appeasement of a similar nature to what we've seen I guess thus far with China, or with I think there's going to be small levels of appeasement for China, where we're going to let them do a little bit, and then we're going to let them do a little bit more.
All right.
And we're not going to risk open war with China until they get involved somewhere else outside of their region.
All right, we can see that. All right, I agree and disagree. I think if they go across the Straits of Taiwan, everyone's going to go off.
Right, but I don't know that they're going to do that.
Well, I don't know why they're still amassing all these soldiers there.
Oh, I mean, I think what China wants, I don't think China wants to, go after our, I guess, naval forces in the area. I think they just want a show of force so that we back down and leave.
Yeah, Trump did that stupidly. He pulled our guys out of those bases on the islands.
Yeah. Because if they can get us to leave without shots fired, that's the ideal situation for them.
Well, then that's going to be that. Isn't that just appeasement at that point?
Pretty much.
Just take it. It doesn't matter. Take it.
Yeah. And that's why I think that's what they're going for more so than actually trying to I guess threaten us militarily. Because I think the thing is, everyone agrees that some big global conflict would be a disaster for everyone involved. So nobody wants that. So if there are any avenues that can be explored before that, they will be explored, and I think that's what's happening currently with China.
Oh, that's why they keep doing these hand-to-hand battles with the Indians. It's more so intimidation than anything else.
They don't want to escalate it to the point of war, but they do want their way.
Can we talk about how ridiculous it is? Everyone, please listen to this. The Indians and Chinese have had like 6 big, like 300 on each side battles over the last 2 years, but they weren't actually defined as battles because they didn't use guns. They just beat each other with clubs and rocks.
They were brawls. You see, they were government sanctioned brawls.
So I guess the Battle of Thermopylae was just a freaking brawl.
Absolutely,
Troy was a brawl, I guess. What is this? Are you kidding me?
So we just talked a lot about tensions rising. Let's talk about somewhere where tensions might be on the down. Whether or not it's a good or a bad thing, with that we'll leave that up to you. But quote, this article from CNBC, quote, "It is time to end America's longest war. Biden announces U.S. troops to leave Afghanistan by September 11th." So,
he looks so old.
The long and the short of this article is, and we'll go through it in just a second, or at least go through parts of it. But the long and the short of it is that we're pulling out of Afghanistan. Washington. President Joe Biden said Wednesday he will withdraw U.S. combat troops from Afghanistan by September 11th, ending America's longest war. The removal of approximately 3,000 American service members coincides with the 20th anniversary of September 11, 2001, terror attacks which spurred America's entry into the lengthy wars in the Middle East and Central Asia. It's time to end America's longest war. It is time for American troops to come home, Biden said in his televised address from the White House Treaty Room, where former President George W. Bush announced military action against al-Qaeda and the Taliban in October 2001. All right, any thoughts so far?
This is just annoying to me because I think it's really messed up. He's using September 11th as like, oh, haha, look, exactly this amount of years we've been at war. And it's like, dude, we were supposed to pull out next month. That was, like, that's the thing. Did he renegotiate with the Taliban? Because under Trump, the deal was made. There would be no more violence, and the troops will leave by May, I think, 15th. Like, was a new negotiation made, or is this just Biden grandstanding?
I have no idea.
Because
now,
he said we will leave unless we get attacked. So what happens if May 20th comes and we're already supposed to be gone? And the Taliban retaliates, then we stay.
That would be a big problem.
That's what I'm worried about.
I would say what's interesting to note is that what Biden was talking about in terms of pulling out troops isn't the pulling out of American influence in the region entirely. He was exclusively pulling out American troops from Afghanistan specifically.
Yeah,
so
combat troops.
He wanted to be clear that it wasn't a pullout from the Middle East, that our fight against terror is still going on, but that he's trying to end it now, pulling out our troops from specifically Afghanistan. And I mean, I do get that the Taliban at the moment aren't necessarily like the largest terror threat.
Well, they're also a government.
No. Right. So, what he was talking about in his, I guess, it wasn't a press when he addressed the nation about it.
I was Biden doesn't do press meetings.
Yeah.
I was like, Biden doesn't do that.
What he was talking, like one thing he was, I guess, mentioned is that hold on, my brain just stopped working there for a minute. Let me think about where
Joe?
I was. Something
Joe?
about Joe and
Joe?
Afghanistan.
Joe?
I didn't know I'm related to him. Oh God.
Oh, Jesus, no. Oh, dear God.
So no, it's completely gone.
That's unfortunate.
Amazing.
My
brain is fantastic.
My thing is, because from what I've read and I've understood about this, he worked with the president, Ashraf Ghani, but he's not a member of the Taliban. So
Right.
I'm very cautious. I think the Taliban will retaliate, and I think we're gonna get dragged back in. And because you know what, again, we go off this nice words, but do you mean it?
Oh, I remembered where my brain was going. By the way, it was he was careful to mention that our pulling out of Afghanistan was because he believed we accomplished our goal of stopping terror against the United States specifically in Afghanistan. So he didn't even like, I mean, whether or not we've accomplished that, only time will tell on whether or not there will be more terror coming from Afghanistan in the near future, directed towards the U.S. But he was specific to note that the purpose of going in was to stop terrorism against the U.S. and that they're pulling out because they don't think the threat is there in Afghanistan for terror to happen against our country.
Okay. Well, now,
which it's just interesting given our past in staying in Afghanistan was an attempt to stabilize the region before we left. And this is there's a staunch 180 from that, where we're saying we've done the best we can. We're not going to be able to completely stabilize the region, but we've accomplished the goal of stopping terror against specifically Americans coming specifically from Afghanistan.
Okay, I agree, but you know what? This is like this Iron Man moment. You know, America, we make our best villains. We make our biggest enemies. Terrorism, and everyone, I want you to hear this. This is something, because right now, I don't know if a lot of people know this, they're calling it the Troubles 2.0, have just started up in Northern Ireland again. They're throwing firebombs at RUC, they're attacking Protestants, demanding reunification with the South. It's all starting back up again. Terrorism isn't a dying flame. Terrorism is an infestation. And unless you get every bug, it's going to come back. So you have an organization like the Provisional Irish Republican Army. I'm not going to make this a religion thing. I'm just going to name terrorist groups. You got groups like the Provisional Irish Republican Army. They laid low since the 90s. They rebuild. They get better. They understand the communications. They understand everything, and then they come back. You had groups like ISIS who came off Al-Qaeda. They saw the failures of Al-Qaeda, so they learned to get better. They fell, and now you have these subgroups starting to show up. And honestly, the Taliban's still around. They were never defeated. So we need to really sit there and look and be like, hey, is it over though? Is it? You know what I mean? It's like a cockroach infestation. You might have killed 200, but all it takes is one to survive.
Right, and even if our entire history in Afghanistan has led to the stopping of terror against the U.S. coming from Afghanistan, that's not stopping terror in Afghanistan. That's not stopping terror against the U.S. That's such a small and minute portion of our involvement in the Middle East and what our goals are there in regards to terror, that it's hard to say that this is realistically I don't even think us pulling out of Afghanistan, while it's going to make it a difference in like the way things shape out, I don't think it's like I don't think it's a trendsetter. I don't think we're pulling out of the Middle East entirely. I don't think we're ending any like war on terror by doing this.
Yeah, no. Well, I think we can't leave at this point, because what's going to happen is we've weakened the region so bad that you'll either have China, Russia, Iran, or even Saudi Arabia will sweep in, take over, make puppet governments that they control, and that's what's going to happen. It's a very difficult situation we're in, and this is like, I made the joke earlier, the worst thing we could have done was got rid of Saddam. That really was the worst thing we could have done, because since his removal from power and his execution, that region has been a bigger powder keg than ever before. Like, the Ayatollah was afraid of Saddam, and now the Ayatollah, we might have killed, what was his name? The dude, Soleimani?
Yeah, that's it.
We might have killed him, but the Iranian army's still there. And the Iranian army is the biggest supporter of terrorist organizations. Look what happened. And the other thing is, terror just is terror. Like, we had that incident in Boulder. Everyone likes to say this was a gun incident, but the gentleman was a Syrian refugee who was posting anti-American, pro-terrorist posts. So we looked at it as like a gun problem. Maybe it was a problem that we had just bombed Syria, and this man was from Syria, and he was angry. That's a terrorist. Well, we kind of did a terroristic thing at the same time, which I was against. But
at the end of the day, even if I take Biden at his word that we accomplished our goals in Afghanistan, somebody is going to go in there, destabilize the region, Iran, Russia, and it's gonna this will be a problem in the future.
Yeah.
Now, perhaps there is an argument that we ought to be leaving, since arguably in Afghanistan, for a threat to the U.S., it's not a problem at the moment. And maybe that's the case. Maybe we should be leaving. But it is clear that by leaving, we are allowing the threat to exist at a higher level than it would exist if we stayed in the region. And as long as we're aware of that as we leave, we and keep a careful eye and make sure that nothing goes wrong, I don't necessarily think leaving is a net negative. It's just we need to do this in a way that makes sure that we're not, I guess, presenting ourselves to more of a threat.
Yeah, and we've always talked about this. I am opposed to being there. I remember when Trump said, "Okay, we'll leave soldiers there to guard the oil." God, I miss him.
Guy makes no sense.
God, I miss him.
Guard the oil.
God, even if
what a madman.
Even if he wasn't president, just the things he said, like, God, put him back on Twitter. I just want to hear. I want to hear the nonsense. God, I love it. But I've always been non-interventionist, because honestly, non-interventionism is why America was able to grow the way we did. But at this point, we've become so much of the world police. And what the frick? And it's just like, we need something. The fight has been so long. So many have suffered and struggled. It's just like, I heard this famous quote from Lyndon B. Johnson that said, "A man can't fight if he doesn't see light at the end of the tunnel." It's like, it's been forever. The Russians learned just as much as we did that Afghanistan is a lost fight. Also because we made it a lost fight for them. Thank you for the man who later would betray us. But it's exhausting. It has been an exhausting war. We've sent so many poor women and men to their deaths. It's just, I understand we don't want this region to get destabilized again. But we need to understand, we need to figure something out, because what we're doing isn't working.
I agree on that note. And as someone who's maybe a bit more of an interventionist than you are, I'm also not convinced that we should be staying in Afghanistan. I'm not super informed on what the Taliban's movements and like current activity is, so I'm not. Yeah, I'm not like the best person in terms of knowledge on that front. But like, I would absolutely agree that what we've been doing, as much as we have like lessened terrorism, we have come nowhere close to stopping it, and it's clear that there is some other solution needed, but it's really difficult to figure out what that solution is, because we can't just go in and kill everyone, right? That's not going to work. And we can't, and we try, like, in terms of going in and working with the, like, governments and people in the countries, in the regions that we're in, that's what we're trying now. And while that worked to a degree, it's not working to the degree that we would have liked. And I don't think I or anyone else has the answer in terms of how we should be handling this. But it would be great if we could find a solution to this that actually worked and didn't, I guess, and kept us from having to like commit atrocities.
Yeah, it's like the DC thing. It's like, who are you asking? The people? Like, what do the Afghanis want? It's like the peace of our time with Neville Chamberlain and Hitler. It's real cool France, England, and Italy were talking about it. What did Czechoslovakia have to say about it?
Exactly.
It's like, and you know what? I understand where America is in the world. We're the big country. We're the big dog. The Chinese and Russians are too. The English used to be. Boo them. Rest in peace, Prince Philip. But
you know the Queen's single now.
I know. I'm gonna hit that. Hello, love. Watch it. You're gonna see. I look like Prince Albert, kinda. I could be the new Albert. I'm fat like him, I think. But it's like, we need to stop acting like we are the ones in charge of everything, because we've been hearing this thing. It's like, oh, we're the big brother. We need to keep them moving. They were doing just fine. Let them figure it out on their own. Let's continue to help Israel because they're our ally. Okay, they're surrounded by people who hate them, so we need to protect them. But let Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, let them make the decisions on their own. Or else we're going to keep having places like Mogadishu and Somalia. Like, we keep doing this to these regions, man, and it's like, we got to stop. Because we're just going to keep making enemies for ourselves. We're going to keep causing more deaths. And it just... God.
And to be clear, I don't think just stopping, like, just pulling out everywhere right now would be a good idea whatsoever.
Oh, but, absolutely not.
Right. Because, like, what we're doing there is important and needs to be done. It's just, we need to find a way to do it that actually works.
Yeah, we need to make sure it doesn't happen anymore. Like, what's next? What's the next place we're going to screw up? South Africa? We're going to put some king in charge that's going to go crazy and send legions after our guy. Like, we need to sit... Oh, God, my food's coming back. Oh, that hurts. We need to really sit, and you know what? We need to really start having accountability. Like, you know what? And I'm not trying to, like... I am a Bush supporter. I think he did the best he could with the hands he was given. But if anyone else did the things that happened under his administration, they would have been held up to trial at the UN. It's like, dude, we need some accountability.
And the unfortunate thing is we're in a position where if we stop doing what we're doing now in the Middle East, it'll become a disaster zone. But if we keep doing what we're doing in the Middle East, it's close to that.
Yeah.
So it's like it's a lose-lose. It's like a lose or lose more situation where if we pull out, it's awful. But if we stay in, it's still pretty bad.
Yeah. Like, how long until Iran just like, when they finally get their nukes or whatever, they're finally like, all right, let's get rid of them. Hits the button, and literally it's gonna be gone. Like, just, it needs to stop. We need to figure out how to be, like, again, I'm anti-interventionist, but if we're going to be interventionist, we need to figure out how to do it and not make 1,000 more enemies by doing it.
All right. I think we've exhausted my ability to talk on this topic. I don't know if you have anything else that you wanted to add.
No, everyone just like we said earlier during the other thing. If you do choose to protest, be careful. We don't want anyone getting hurt. Watch the news. Like, actually watch the news. Don't watch these biased sources. Watch everything, because the truth is always in the middle. Just like this. What's her? Oh, I feel so bad. What's her name? Machaya. What's her name?
Bryant.
Miss Bryant. Unfortunate situation, but at the same time, we can't have it like, oh, it was this little girl, she did nothing wrong. The police rolled up to the scene, her dad was kicking a girl in the head, and she was about to stab another girl. I really don't know what people want police to do at this point. If a police officer can't save another girl from being stabbed, I really don't know why we have them anymore. It's like, it's crazy. But just, we need everything to calm down. Write to your congressmen and senators and tell them, just please try to work with the other side. Because clearly President Biden's not actually working towards unity. He keeps saying he does, but every time I give him the benefit, he jumps the rail. Just, we need everyone to unite. That's really all I got to say.
All right. Well, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for listening in, and hope everyone watching has a wonderful day.
Fare thee well.